So this is a case of begin at the beginning there. In fact, God, I can hear a car coming right now. That's the road just up there, and where that sunlight is, just on that stretch. In fact, my head's just about at wheel height. There it goes. So we're standing in the hinterland of the bush edge at the moment. The bush edge up on the road, and then we've got this intermediate zone which actually is diffused, but infestation, and then the main area of pine itself actually is serious asparagus. So the restoration work I've started here is actually in this buffer zone actually, which will strengthen the bush edge and start to circle in on the centre of the infestation site. Looking down this way, you can see how close we are. Well, we're certainly, relatively speaking, actually how the water's just out here. We're at 80 metres above sea level, and it sure climbs very steeply from here down to Curry Creek. We're actually wedged between two catchments that feed into Curry Creek and then feed out into a wetland and then out into the marine reserve. And in fact, this is part of what makes this reserve so special, is this unbroken catchment from spur to sea as far as watercourse is concerned. And so these weed infestations, particularly at the top of the spurs, are extremely important to keep on top of, because thanks to water runoff and gravity, the seed source here literally just rolls down the hill. And so it may well be that some of this infestation that actually has occurred down in the pine area actually started at the bush edge and has just been working its way down ever since, over the last 10 or 15 years since the pine tree was poisoned. So this area we're standing in is actually right at the top of the catchment leading down to the sea, and it's such an important feature of the Scenic Reserve that we've got an area of, a large area of uninterrupted catchment from spur down into the marine reserve, which makes these weed seed sources at the top extremely important to be on top of. In fact, a priority when we actually start doing this work is actually working from the top down, actually, given that groundwater and gravity actually has the seeds rolling down the hill. So if one was working from the bottom up, one's actually fighting with an ongoing source of seed rolling down over the areas you've already treated. So begin at the beginning here is from the top down, and that's how today is started. Started from the road, which is fairly clear. We're actually in the buffer zone at the moment, which has actually been prepped for the contractors when they come. Released all the asparagus has been topped, and it's gone out to a very distinct, or in fact a distinct ecotone, which I think is probably really where the dope growers actually carved out their very nice little square. And that's going to have a different form of control. And we're going to go down there and take a little look. There's a great example of rubbish piling efficiently. Pile it high, pile it behind a tree so it doesn't roll down the hill, and pile it on an area where there is no infestation, so it's not going to cause too much of a problem later. There's certainly weed seed within this pile of rubbish, which will come up in due course, but nothing of any great significance. Yeah. And this entire upper area of the buffer zone up above the infestation site itself, which has been prepared, all the rubbish and all the toppings will come to this one site. So now one can safely see everywhere that needs to be treated. There's no tripping hazards, there's visual access, leads to much greater efficiency as far as the work in here is concerned. And then down in here, I would say this little Kakataea could be 5 years old maybe. It feels as though it's right on the edge as far as moisture tolerance is concerned, though we've got some others in the reserve which actually look slightly more ill than this. It's only put on a small amount of growth this year, but what growth it's put on is actually very tasty, very healthy, but it's slow growing, and the rampant nature of a climbing asparagus means that if there are more Kakataea that germinate here in the future, they don't stand a snowball's chance if the climbing asparagus is left to its own devices there. But this is a lovely, lovely example of how in this area here there's an awful lot of different types of plant. Where we're standing at the moment is on the far side of the pine, asparagus, and the pine Lightwell, the asparagus infestation is a straight line that runs like an ecotone actually, boundary between where the infestation stops and the good bush starts basically in ME3. And in this direction is one of the more important clusters of kauri over there. I can just see them through the trees there. My deep concern is that this area of infestation is far too close to that plant community from the point of view of being a threat, certainly because this is a moth plant magnet anyway. But even with the asparagus as well, this is a seed source that does not need to, certainly is a threat to that plant community over there. But it is a reminder also of why there's such a wonderful variety of plants here, because there's a lot of seed just in there of a great many species actually. So it actually feels as though it belongs more to this side of the reserve than the other side of the reserve, which is in full-scale emergency mode where there's not much happening other than kanuka and grass. This is the outer edge of our more diverse part of the reserve. Look at these lovely panga all coming up here and amongst the climbing asparagus at the moment, which certainly points to the fact that even though it seems dry and arid in this area, there are spots that are moist, and they're certainly going to grow a bit more than higher up. But anything like this that actually can grow more quickly means that we're going to get closure here sooner, and certainly see less of this exploding asparagus population which we've got at the moment when there's not much competition to actually stop it. So you're looking at a gorse heap piled right off the area of infestation. We're standing in an area of asparagus seedlings at the moment, and previously one would have heaped much more care. If it was emergency control, I wouldn't have bothered of actually taking this gorse so far away, but because we're actually doing full-scale ecological restoration here, we're actually going to clobber all this peripheral climbing asparagus, which means actually taking the rubbish properly off-site right out of the infestation zone is vital, otherwise all is lost before you've even begun. It's a bit of a fag, but it's certainly worth the effort. So this is the best way to show actually how to begin at the beginning with a massive infestation when we're doing ecological restoration, is actually use the secondary weeds actually as a way to actually case the joint at the same time. And in this case there's actually just been one small cluster of gorse, and not too old fortunately either, so they've been reasonably easy to get out of here even though it's damn steep. So gorse, I've still got to cart it way over to that heap over there, out from there, but in the meantime by going in further and further to get that gorse, I've actually been able to see I have not seen any moth in there, and that's by far the best bit of news. And it's allowed me to actually just plan how we're going to hit the asparagus as the main event long term while I'm doing this. And of course I've been taking out all the fallen pine tree rubbish at the same time, so that's been removing tripping hazards, and I'm starting to create a path through here which a day ago was just impassable. Yeah. So nibbling away, it's 700 square metres can be done. So we're standing on the ecotone, the boundary of the infestation. In this direction is Kauri Creek, with a large kauri associated plant community here, and behind me is this enormous pine tree Lightwell, which has likely been created because of the dope growers, which we're working on at the moment. It's a very distinct line straight up the hill where the asparagus basically finishes and roars away in this direction, then becomes fairly clear and open bush in the other direction there. So walking in this way, you actually get quite close to the source, the centre, the epicentre as far as the pine tree is concerned. This was poisoned 10-15 years ago, I guess, and in that time the borer has been at quite a bit of the peripheral branches, and they've rotted off and collapsed and fallen away, but that's brought in an awful lot of light, and as the light in this area has increased, the weed growth has exponentially increased as well. So a lot of this weed here is of the age of when the tree was poisoned, and more recently than that. So what remains of this pine tree is still quite significant, but it gives an idea of actually how huge this tree was to start with. It was enormous. It goes down further, because this land is so steep here, it actually goes down further than it appears, actually quite straight. And it's just been shedding its branches over the last few years with just the trunk to remain. It's going to make a hell of a mess when the rest of it all comes down, but if we're on top of the weeds before then, at least the damage it will do will only be to canopy rather than actually creating more weed problems in the future. There's some Upoka tangata just here, which is a plant that's normally found on the peripheral edges of wetlands. There is behind me a black Matuku. You can see that the black petiole is very clearly of that panga, which definitely prefers wetter conditions than the silver fern. So this is telling me that there's seepage going on in this area here, and I'm certain that this would have been the epicentre of the dope growing. It's not too far from the road, still hidden, moist and sheltered, fairly sunny and hot. They probably grew some quite good dope here. And this is an example of doing the secondary weeds in this pine Lightwell. And I'm managing them. One's actually looking and noticing other things. If I hadn't come down here specifically for this pampas, I wouldn't have noticed that mamaku next door. Then I wouldn't have realised actually there was an area of moisture, for example. So this knowledge that comes from simply doing this secondary kind of work actually is sometimes quite interesting. So pampas on the whole isn't so much of an issue in closed bush because of sunlight, but there is enough sun here that the chances are this guy will still seed and it will still throw its seed into the bush. So I'd much rather get rid of it now. Taking the top off it, it's not that old. It's only been there 3 or 4 years, I would say. But it has the chance of some exponential growth still, and I've got some dry glyphosate, which is my favourite. Yeah, and it just has to be the easiest, simplest thing to kill. I wish other things were as easy as that. And that will just stick and do its magic as moisture becomes either in dew in the morning or later on in the season. That glyphosate will just wait until it's activated by some moisture to kill off, then it'll be dead.